Just the one thing I said I'd touch on the next slide, sustainable development. This is something you probably have experienced yourself. If you think about, so if we look at development efficiency, i.e. how quickly can we achieve a particular piece of work on the vertical axis, and then the horizontal axis is effectively time. Over time, our system becomes bigger and more complicated. This is what a legacy approach typically looks like. On day one, hey, there's nothing there. I can knock together almost anything else. There's nothing else to break. I can achieve stuff very, very quickly. But as the accumulated amount of stuff that's there over time increases, my efficiency goes down. Why? First of all, there's more stuff for me to test against, and if that testing is manual, that takes time. And secondly, there's more stuff for me to test against, therefore there's more chance of me breaking something. But if I have to test it for 3 days before I find I've broken something, then I have to fix it, then I have to start my testing again. So you end up in these loops. And in practical terms, that line actually tends to zero. In reality, what happens is after 2 or 3 years of this, organizations say, look, it is not feasible for us to develop for 2 weeks and then test for a month. The business can't sustain that. Therefore, we're going to cap our testing at a week. And so that's fine. This line flattens off in terms of efficiency. But of course, what happens is over time, the effective test coverage of the percentage you get in a week goes down. So you're now, yes, your testing is only ever taking a week, but you're testing a lower and lower percentage of the system, and therefore your risk is going up and up and up over time. The DataOps approach is basically the inverse of this. In the first week of the project, you will be slower. Why? Because even on a greenfield site, you've got to do the functional stuff, but you've also write some tests for it. And it takes a week or two for someone to get relatively proficient at that. So there is a bit of a ramp-up curve in learning how to create the models and how to create the tests. However, once you've been doing it for 2 or 3 weeks, you flatten off. And the point here is that I'm as efficient after 3 years as I am after 3 months. Why? Because the only real difference in terms of me building in a system that's got 3 years worth of accumulated stuff is the amount of tests that have to run. And they're not costing any human time. What are they costing? They're costing Snowflake processing credit and CPU cycles. Well, you know what? CPU cycles are cheap, really cheap. One of the DevOps in general, but DataOps in particular, principles is let's understand that basically people are very, very expensive and they're certainly not getting cheaper. And compute resources are very, very cheap and they get cheaper every day. And let's build our processes around that paradigm, because it's amazing the number of organizations that say, I'm doing X, Y, Z. I spent a month building this because it's going to save 3%. What does that 3% save you? Oh, it's going to save us $100 a year. Hang on, you told me you spent months building something to save $100 a year. There's no version of the world where that makes sense. But people have quite a warped model often in terms of how efficiently I should try and process something versus the manual time it takes, the manual input times. This is what we mean by sustainable development. There's a little bit of a ramp up. Our experience is the break-even point is probably a week or less. We've got DataOps projects where even our internal engineers, it's their first DataOps project, but they are more efficient after a week of doing this because of the automated testing, because of the collaboration and everything else, than they would have been doing a legacy approach. Everything from that point onwards is effectively profit in terms of efficiency.